It's the Gameday Workers Podcast, first episode ever. Welcome. My name is Barry Beal, founder and editor of GamedayWorkers.com, the new blog, podcast, and job board dedicated to part-time game day staff at sports events and to the professionals who hire them. I hope you enjoy the site and you enjoy the resource that it will hopefully become for game day workers around the country. So what exactly is a game day worker? A public address announcer is a game day worker, and so are statisticians and ushers and ticket takers, security guards, parking attendants, and even an official scorer at a professional baseball game. These are all game day workers. Basically, a game day worker is somebody who works nights and weekends at these games, and it usually isn't their full-time job. Game day workers represent a large faction of the staff who works at athletics events. You're probably here because you're either one of these people who holds one of these jobs, or you'd like to get one of these jobs, or you hire for these jobs. In any case, welcome. I created this resource because I saw a need for this type of information in the athletics community. I've held a game day job in some form since 2002 when I was just a 17-year-old high school senior. These game day worker jobs that I've held, from serving as a high school public address announcer to a football referee, yes, officials and referees are game day workers, and a stat stringer for minor league baseball, have been some of the most fulfilling jobs of my career. I've met lots of great people and made plenty of good memories. On our site, GamedayWorkers.com, you can find these podcasts, blog posts, and a job board exclusively for game day worker job openings at high schools, colleges, and professional teams around the country. We hope you'll grow with us right from the start. And if you'd like to advertise a job opening with GamedayWorkers.com, if you work for a team, a college, or a high school, you can head to the site for more information by clicking the job board link at the top of the site. This podcast will run weekly with a different guest from the world of athletics and game day workers. It can be a game day worker who can offer some advice and a good story or two, or maybe it'll be a full-time employee or administrator from a team or organization with experience hiring for these types of positions. There's lots of good insight from that side as well. Today's guest for our first podcast is an old friend and colleague of mine. His name is Matt Franzblau. We worked together as athletics communications assistants at Oregon State University from 2012 to 2013. And while that job functioned as a full-time job, we also worked game day jobs like serving as production assistants for Pac-12 network games, and we also served as PA announcers at each other's events. So along with our weekly guests, I'm excited to share some of my favorite experiences as a game day worker, or also managing game day workers. And I'm happy to have you here along for the ride. So when we come back, Matt Franzblau will be here as our very first guest on the Gameday Workers Podcast. Back here on the Gameday Workers Podcast, Barry Beal, first ever podcast, first guest, Matt Franzblau. Matt, how are we doing today?
Hanging in there, Barry. Hanging in. We've hit a little bit of a cold snap in South Florida, so it's in the 60s.
So, and I said this earlier on that when I worked with you, it was in Oregon. And this time of year in Oregon, it was not the same kind of weather you're probably getting in Florida right now.
It's not, but it wasn't too much colder than, other Northeast or Midwest locales I've been. As you know, Oregon is pretty moderately, never gets really hotter than 85, never colder than 35. So, but yeah, I mean, for 65 being chilly, yeah, it's not like that at all in Central Oregon.
And one of the things that I didn't bring up, Matt, is why you're in Florida now. What is your current profession? What do you do? And how did you get there from being in athletics?
Yeah, long winding road, Barry. After Oregon State, went to like a full-time video gig in a small college in southern New Jersey. And, that just didn't, I think, really work out. It just wasn't a good fit. And randomly, Stetson University in DeLand, Florida, had a temporary position. They said, hey, you interested? I jumped at the chance, and unexpectedly, I sort of sometimes I think you just take certain detours and you don't really know why, but after you take them, you kind of realize in retrospect why you're there. And while I was in DeLand, I was very active in the Orlando Jewish community, and I'd been to Israel a few years before, and just sort of spoke to me. So I said, I think I want to get out of college athletics and start working in the Jewish world. So I've kind of been, I took a pit stop at Penn State, and I've kind of been doing that ever since, whether it's been Jewish nonprofits, working in communications, then fundraising, and now doing a little bit of PR for an Israeli hospital.
So do you think that the world of athletics, even on a part-time basis or game day basis, is behind you for good?
I would say the only way I would probably ever work in any type of athletic environment again would be if I got some part-time gig or something for like an Israeli soccer team. If I was living in Israel, and maybe in Netanya, they had just built a new stadium. But other than that, no, I wouldn't. I'd just be a spectator.
Oh, well, that's okay. So along those lines, let's talk about the past then, because you had plenty of interesting jobs, especially when we were in Oregon together. And one of the things that maybe it was more foreign to me maybe than it was to you, but were a lot of the jobs that were involved in the TV production side, especially because Pac-12 Network had just opened that year. So we kind of saw the beginning of, a whole TV network come out. So can you just take me through some of the experience you had specifically with Pac-12 networks?
Yeah, and I'm glad you corrected yourself, because I think at first you said Pac-12 Network, and then you remember that, and they were very keen on no, it's Pac-12 Networks. So, it was really interesting because I came from you had been in Frostburg, and I was at Kansas we were both grad students, and so I had done a lot. We had like ESPN, like Beth Mowens, and announcers doing women's basketball games, and I was giving the talent like note cards. I also did a lot of utility, running the wires for volleyball matches. We had a really great volleyball team at Kansas, also at Oregon State. And, aside from that, I also did a few other things more specifically for the athletic program when it came to, men's basketball games, football. But for the videos and the networks, it was mainly the utility and sort of helping the talent out. When I got to Oregon State, I had seen it. I had just never done it, but I didn't even know what it was called, but Red Hat. And that the notion of that, I sort of had to get used to it. But of course, you always see it's that person on the field. They're coming back, and you're like, why is there this person on the field? Well, because they're telling people not to start play until they're back from commercial, and they have to clear for a second or two. So so I ended up doing Red Hat for I think some men's soccer and volleyball. Yeah, which was interesting experience, and it can be a little bit nerve-wracking because you have people barking in your ear at the truck, you have the referees yelling at you. It's like everybody's upset with you, and you're just trying to control things. So that was interesting.
So, and I want to dive into this a little bit because I never had a chance to be the Red Hat. That was the job that eluded me through the entire year that we were there.
It's your mistress.
Yeah. What is the relationship with the official? I mean, is he aware? I mean, especially for a sport like volleyball, say, where, maybe they're not always televised, is there something where you had to be proactive to go up to the official and say, hey, I need you to wait for me? Or like, what was that relationship like for, one of the Olympic sports as opposed to say football or basketball?
Yeah, I think football and they know. Volleyball, it was clear to me, of course I didn't 100% know what I was doing because it was only like the second time. I think legitimately the first time I ever did it, I literally wore a red hat just to be sort of a joke and an homage to the position. But I went up to, because I remember I went up to the woman who was the lead official and said, hey, I'm doing Red Hat. And, they kind of instructed me in the truck, don't just watch me and I'll let you know. And she was fairly, understanding, but when you get in the heat of the moment and there's certain technical hangups and there's a couple of seconds or like 20 to 30 seconds, if the referee doesn't know what's going on in the truck, and I'm sort of just only hearing out of my ear and I don't know what's going on, 20 or 30 seconds to hold up a match is a long time. So, I remember a guy barking in my ear from Pac-12 Network saying, "Don't let them start, Matt. Don't let them start." And I'm just kind of like, I'm telling him to hold on, hold. And then they start. And then he starts, cursing in my ear. And I'm, like, I don't know. You want me to, I was on the edge of the court. Like, what do? Run and like grab the net? So I just sort of let it go. And it's not the end of the world, but he seemed to think so, the producer in the truck. And I'm actually Facebook friends with him now. So it's a happy ending.
And then along those lines with some of those other game day jobs, especially with the Pac-12 networks, I think you were, what did they call it? A set manager, a set producer, a director? Like what was that job where you were sort of with the talent, giving them the direction on when to look at the screen? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, God, I don't remember the name of it. Stage manager. That's what it was. Stage manager.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and I remember doing that specifically for men's soccer, and I remember there being, I think there was a soccer player named Roberto Farfan.
Yeah, that was one of our players. I just
remember like pointing. Oh, is that what the Oregon State players?
That was one of our guys.
Yeah, and I remember pointing to the screen or something, and trying to tell the talent to look at certain things, but I just remember it was so odd because it's almost like they would almost like disobey you for a few seconds, and just sort of not look at the screen and sort of ignore you. And then eventually on their own terms come to it. But I remember the talent being very, dramatic and deliberate in his pronunciation of Roberto. And he would cock his head up and say, Farfa.
Now you brought up, this is a perfect segue, Franzblau, because you brought up something that I want to get to is another soccer player pronunciation. You stepped in admirably for me. I was the men's soccer contact. You were the women's soccer contact. I remember there was a Friday night, we had a volleyball match, I think. And our normal soccer PA announcer was in the building working volleyball. So I come to Franzblau, Mr. Reliable. I say, Franzblau, I need you to do PA for me. We're playing Stanford. There was a player on Stanford named, I can't remember his first name. It was Darsu, I believe, but his last name was Abdul Fadi.
Yeah.
And that was not what came out of your mouth whenever he did something, came into the game, whatever it may have been, or the starting lineups. Go ahead and explain what happened when Darsu Abdul Fadi needed to be announced.
Okay, so thank you, because to this day, and this is the first time I've known the correct pronunciation of his name. I mean, that's been like 7 years ago. So thank you. That's poor man, Darsu Abdul Fadi. Okay. So, and this wasn't really my fault. The coach is sort of, I don't know what the coach was trying to do, but so I'm in there and, and I told you, I'm more of a Bob Shepard PA announcer, Al batting, number 2, shortstop, Derek Jeter, number 2, so I'm not very crazy, yell or what have you, but I just go to the Stanford coach at the beginning of, the pregame warm-ups, and I say, hey, coach, I'm just doing PA tonight. I want to make sure get the correct pronunciations. And, I run through like 2 names, and then I say, okay, so like number, 14. Is it, so Darsu, is it Apple Fatty? Is that what? He's just like, yeah, that's fine. And I said, well, okay, really? So it's Darsu Apple Fatty. He said, yeah, it's good, whatever. And I kind of like in the back of my mind was like, I don't think this is right. And I don't think he cares. Like he just wants me to just, who knows, maybe it pissed him off and it motivated him because I think Stanford won. So, so I say, okay, all right, that's fine. I'm just going to do what the coach told me. And I'm, so I'm up there saying, number 13 Walker replaces number 14 Darsu Apple Fatty. And it just, and as soon as I said that, people like looked up at me and started laughing. And I just, I was like, well, that's his name, or at least what the coach told me. So I don't, to this day, I feel bad, but the coach obviously wanted me to mispronounce his name. Maybe he thought it was, maybe it was like a joke or something on the team bus. And you were like, Franzblau, what somebody was saying, that somebody was at the game from our staff and they were like, why are you butchering Stanford player's name?
Yeah, I can remember that and thinking, what did he say? and I said, well, okay, I guess. I mean, if nobody complained, I mean, people laughed, but nobody complained. So I guess it was okay.
That's what the coach told me. But in this day and age, I'm sure if I did that, I would have been accused of being, certain, ethnocentric or racist or something and be canceled, who knows, and it wouldn't have even been my fault. It would have been the coach, but anyway.
Yeah. You had a flair for the pronunciations, but the fact that you brought up Roberto Farfan, just as a perfect segue for Darsu Apple Fatty. So we had some fun with those names. And you also, in that explanation, brought up Bob Shepard. So you're obviously a Yankees fan, even though on the Zoom call you're wearing a retro Tampa Bay Devil Ray jersey. So can you tell me, maybe not a story about Bob Shepard, but, the first time you were aware of him, or, how that, obviously he's one of the most famous PA announcers in American sports. Where did that come from for you to, either try to emulate him or just, be a fan?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess just growing up, Yankee fan in New Jersey, going to like 10, 12 games a year. He was just sort of the voice of my childhood. And I guess I kind of thought, it never dawned on me that like no other stadium had a PA announcer like that. And, then I heard other, like the Mets, they're like number 32, Edgardo Alfonso, or, and I was like, wow, Bob Shepard's really different. And it's a very sort of austere, but elegant, godly way of speaking. And it's very unique. And so I think the older I got, the more I realized how unique it was. They honored him in 2000 for his 50th year. And I believe he announced up until 2007, and he had to step away in mid-season, and he never returned for his health. He died at like 100 in 2010. But I don't know. I tried to emulate myself after him. So, I think I did PA for the softball team one time, and God, I don't remember. Wasn't there like a Lauren Abadia or something, or Badiola or something?
Yeah, and you mispronounced her name, one of our own players, and that got us all in hot water.
Yeah, so but I did mispronounce it elegantly. It was at least like, now batting for Oregon State, number 15, Lauren Badiola, right field, and you looked at me and just shook your head, and I thought you were shaking my head because I was just doing monotone, but it was because I mispronounced it.
Did you put her number at the end, though? If you did that, that might have made up for it. At least everybody would have known what you were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, the second go around. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. Water under the bridge.
Yeah, plenty of years ago. So we don't have to revisit all of your public address announcer follies, which I think we've already done. I want to leave this with one of my favorite stories that you had, and it has almost nothing to do with you working a game. It has to do with you as a Yankee fan finding out that Scott Brocious was a baseball coach at a smaller school in Oregon. And I'll leave it there for you.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder, I don't know. I think our friend Chase, who he was a softball manager for the team when we were there. And I think he said to me, like Franzblau, Scott Brocious is like the head coach of a Portland area, college baseball team. I said, really? You know what? That sounds familiar. And I investigated it, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course. That's like 40 miles away. And so obviously I'm working in college athletics, and, it's a small college. So I just emailed him, and I said, Coach Brocious, Matt Franzblau. And I said, I work at Oregon State in athletics. I'm from New Jersey. I grew up going to Yankee games. And I told him about this memory. My grandparents' 50th anniversary was July 3rd, 99, excuse me. And, my grandfather had passed away 2 years prior. So my grandmother, she liked the Yankees. She liked the Giants. So we took her to a Yankee game. And, it was sad because it was my grandparents' 50th and my grandfather wasn't there, but she was having a good time. And then what made it so exciting was Scott Brocious hit a walk-off home run, bottom of the ninth inning. And it was like in the left field corner of old Yankee Stadium. It just went into the seats. And she was so thrilled. She was like, oh my God. And so I told him that memory. He said, that's a really neat memory. He said, you should come up for a game sometime, when the season starts. So I said, absolutely. So I went up, just picked a game on a random, cold March, spring, afternoon. Drove up. I wore my Yankee jacket. And I just so happened to have a 1998 World Series baseball autographed with a couple of the players like El Duque, Orlando Hernandez, Joe Torre, Bernie Williams, Jeff Nelson. And I said, well, you know what? Let me just bring it up. I know I work in athletics, but there's still like a teenage Matt Yankee fan in me. And I said, who knows? Maybe he'll sign it. Maybe he won't, but whatever. So I just patiently watched the game from the stands. And by the way, this was also the trip that I've never seen anything like this in my life, but on my GPS, like I couldn't figure out what the hell the logo was. I'm like, I've never seen this before. Like, what am I approaching? It was a car ferry. Like, it was the strangest thing. I had to take a car ferry to actually go across like the Willamette to get there. It was really bizarre. But game's over. They slap hands, they go to the dugout, and I'm sort of, hanging over the overhang with the seats. And I say, hey, coach, Matt from Oregon State. He's like, oh, okay. Hey, good to see you. Thanks. You came up. I said, yeah. It was great. Took the drive up. I just wanted to see you guys play. And, I'm not going to be here for much longer. Season's over and I'm moving back home. So he said, oh, okay. You're going back to Jersey. Yeah. I said, speaking of which, I kind of, and then I reached in my pocket and I said, speaking of which, I brought this ball with me. I have, a lot of your teammates from the 98 team on there. And I sort of like motioned to like, kind of like put it in his direction. And I could just tell he got all of a sudden like very uncomfortable. And I don't know, it was just very strange. It was one of the more uncomfortable moments of my life. And he was just kind of like, oh, okay. And he just slowly backed away. And I was like, then I took the ball and I kind of put it in my pocket. And I said, well, good to see you. I'm glad I came up. He said, yeah, thanks for coming. And then he just kind of walked away and cleaned up stuff in the dugout and left. But I felt like I did something wrong. I was a little embarrassed. And I think I remember telling you and Chase like the next Monday, and you're just, you were a little miffed, but I basically kind of in hindsight realized he's a very unassuming, humble guy. And, he's just in his hometown. And so somebody asking him to autograph a baseball was probably a little uncomfortable, but I don't know. To me, I was excited and I thought like, oh, wow, I could get one more autograph. But yeah, it was, I still feel bad to this day that I made him uncomfortable, but it was very awkward. Yeah.
And I think, that's what we're going for on this podcast. First episode, a lot of podcasts would have the 1998 World Series MVP on their podcast to sort of launch things. On our first episode, we have the guy who made the 1998 World Series MVP extremely uncomfortable and went to his game wearing a Yankees jacket and showed him a baseball of his teammates' autographs.
The way you say it makes it sound a little bit creepy. Like, you know what I mean? Like I almost was in like a tinted van with the ice cream truck music. And I said, oh, here's a ball. Come and sign it. I probably could have been a little bit more tactful, but whatever. Water under the bridge, as they say. That's more water under the bridge.
And on that note, I think that's the perfect place to leave it. And Franzblau, I really appreciate you hopping on and taking us down memory lane with some of these very awkward memories that we have together.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. And, to be honest with you, I'm glad you're doing this because these are the unsung heroes of game day. And, during the pandemic, a lot of them aren't working. So hopefully next year we get them back in the stands, ushering in those fans and working behind the scenes to put on a good production.
All right. Matt Franzblau, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll be right back. Thanks again to Matt Franzblau for joining us on the first episode of the Gameday Workers Podcast. Please head to GamedayWorkers.com for the latest blog posts, podcasts like this one, and also the job board where you can find Game Day Worker jobs from around the country. And also, if you are a recruiter or you work for an organization looking for a Game Day Worker, you can find resumes, or you could also post your job at GamedayWorkers.com. Once again, I'm Barry Beal, founder and editor of GamedayWorkers.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.